Before I start this video, I just want to say that everything I say is fact. None of it is opinion. Disagree with any of it, you're wrong and there's something wrong with you. So enjoy the fucking video.
These are facts, and facts don't care about your feelings.
Each individual has their own narrative about the world. That narrative is informed by every experience they've ever had over the course of their life. This reinforcement and validation can lead them to, well, let's just say, unwise positions.
You're fucking a white male!
The more experience they have to the contrary of something, even if they haven't evaluated that experience correctly, well, each piece of that experience is going to make it harder for them to be moved off that position. That applies to me, that applies to you, it applies to everyone. So what do I mean when I say they haven't evaluated their experiences correctly? I mean, they're their experiences. How can your own experience be wrong? Well, there's this concept in psychology called cognitive bias. Our brains are made to do very specific things and to recognize very specific patterns for survival. A lot of these functional mechanisms can not necessarily lead to truthful outcomes, especially when we're in different conditions than we normally would be. Cognitive biases are prevalent everywhere. A cognitive bias is a systematic pattern of deviation from norm or rationality and judgment. In other words, their experiences, whether evaluated logically, will dictate the way they think and the way they move about the world. The most common cognitive bias is confirmation bias. For a good example of this, imagine you're in a toxic relationship. I'm sure we've all been there. When you're trying to figure out if this person is healthy for you, they might beat you once a month with a frying pan, but you might ignore that if they take your kid to the big game. So when you're cycling through your own personal experiences, you may selectively, whether conscious or unconscious, think of only things that support a certain narrative. Even if those acts of kindness were a vast minority of the time, if you're motivated because you love that person, that might be the only examples that you think of. You might end up only thinking of,
I, Edward, take you, Bella, to be my wife. I promise to be true to you in good times and in bad.
while the reality might be,
I said, do you understand?
Yes.
Now, take that dumb wedding dress off. You can't cook with that thing on.
And this gap between the perception and the reality generally only takes place because of emotion. They're emotionally attached to those experiences as part of the narrative of their life. That emotional attachment pulls you further and further to one side. And emotional repression is bad. This doesn't mean be like some losers who think that every emotion is valid. Emotions are valid in the sense that they exist and you're feeling them. And you're feeling them for a reason. You shouldn't pretend you don't, but not every emotion is reasonable. There are some emotions that are strictly bad and you should work to change. And while emotions should hold a place in your evaluation of life, they shouldn't be used to evaluate what is truth. And what's so hard about this is emotions are so powerful. They can make such an impact, and you can know something logically is true. You can even believe it fully and espouse it, but there is something unique about not only logically resonating with an argument, but emotionally resonating with it too. It's a delicate balancing act, but emotions can be very compromising, and they can lead you completely astray. And especially when it comes to political argument, because just because you feel some way about something doesn't mean it's true. Ironically, even these people that espouse facts over feelings are also completely influenced by their experiences. And not only that, but they're cognitively biased interpretations of those experiences. And the most effective way to flip them on something is to appeal to those experiences and try to flip them emotional. There's this sort of smug superiority about turning off your emotional brain and only appealing to logic. And there's some utility in that, but it's not always completely optimal. These are tools and you just have to use them properly. And looking down on your political opponents or other people, it's not how you persuade them and it's not how you improve.
If you're intelligent, it's very easy. I did this a lot in my early 20s. I looked down on a lot of people. And I saw myself as being better than a lot of people. And I think one of the biggest changes that I've made as a human over my 20s is coming to not see myself as better than people, but seeing myself as different than people, right? Like, sure, I might be more intelligent in this way, but emotionally, I might be lacking this, or artistically, I might be lacking this, or this person, I think, I might be way better than this, but they have a totally different perspective on this thing, and there's I can probably learn something from every person I interact with. They're gonna have at least one thing that they know way more about than I do.
There are three main modes of persuasion. There's ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos is an appeal to authority or credibility of the presenter. It's how well the presenter convinces the audience that the presenter is qualified to speak on the subject. You might have a debate on God, and someone might appeal to the fact that they're a theologian, so they know a lot about the topic. They might even appeal to the fact that the other person is not a theologian, so they don't know as much about the topic. Pathos, on the other hand, is an appeal to the audience's emotion. In that same debate about God, you might appeal to the fact that there's suffering in the world. You might use that as an argument for why God doesn't exist. You might say something like, if a God exists, why does he allow all this suffering? You wouldn't be attacking the actual factual foundations of evidence or not evidence of there being a God. You would be appealing to the audience's emotional reaction. Logos is essentially facts don't care about your feelings personified. It's a logical appeal. That's why you're attacking the actual factual foundation of the matter. You might say, well, there's no evidence of God. They might pull out some historical accuracy that confirms something that was said in the Bible. My contention would be that for the most part, Logos is disguising the pathos. That really, the pathos is wrapped up in a bunch of logos. Basically, you're taking an emotional appeal and you're wrapping it in logic. But the reality is that most of the disagreement is on the pathos, the emotion. But that's not as cool, it's not as flashy. You want to be able to say, oh, the logic is on my side.
Facts don't care about your feelings. And let me tell you something, dear. You must have been the facts. Because you didn't care about my feelings.
Humans don't think in terms of strict facts about the world. We think in terms of narratives and stories. We don't connect with random strings of numbers or a dumping of information, much like what I've done here today. And yes, I know this is a dry video, sue me, but we connect much more with stories and characters. This is why we embody our political opponents into one character. Maybe it's a fat, blue-haired trans woman screaming about pronouns. Maybe it's a neo-Nazi with a comb-over trying to argue why people shouldn't have rights. But being able to connect with a narrative or a character is important. Partly that's because of emotion. I mean, just on an emotional level, random strings of facts don't move you. A character and their development can, their story. So, deconstructing the narrative is just as important as deconstructing the actual factual claims. What is a collection of facts if not a narrative? When someone asks you what did you do when you woke up this morning, you're not going to autistically relay every detail of waking up, opening your eyes, going to the bath. They're asking for you to tell them a story. And the purpose of that story is going to matter a lot when you're determining what facts to leave out, or what facts to include. Our whole life is surrounded by narrative, and to completely ignore those narratives and pretend like it's just facts is naive. Being logical is something that you have to actively work towards. This doesn't happen by accident. Your natural default is towards emotion. So next time you're arguing for something, or you're thinking about something you believe, ask yourself, what is the narrative and how does it make me feel?
Refugees up in here. Sicilians, Jersey, Town, it never stop. The whole refugee camp, yo, 1, 2, yo. We used to be number 10, now we permanent at 1. White clef preachers on Ichiban. Mrs. Tin Can, I'm your candy handy man. Me without shoes like American without the band. Stand, cool fellow, dance hall, stay mellow. All that gun talk, who would've thought you die yellow? Damn, I'm not the hero wanna be. Now he sleeps with his friends in the mortuary.